Okay, well, welcome to the October meeting of the Boston AWS User Group, sometimes affectionately called the Boston User Group. First thing we want to do is thank our sponsors. AWS is sponsoring some of our online costs. Maverick is sponsoring us as well. And especially tonight, Veeam. And Veeam is not only generously sponsoring us with funds, they're also have provided our great speaker tonight. Hami, I'm actually going to let you introduce yourself because I think that's probably best. But we want to really thank you. I mean, it's you know, these meetups are not super hard to put on, but it's hard to put on without sponsors. So we really do appreciate it. And you can take over the screen and away we go.
All right, sounds good. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
All right, awesome. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this meeting. My name is Hani Imam, and I am a systems engineer for the public cloud services at Veeam. And today I'll be talking about some of the best practices that you can do to better protect your AWS environment. And before we move on, I just want to double check. Do I sound clear, loud and clear to everyone?
Yes.
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 Very nice.
Okay, awesome. You guys feel free to stop me anytime during the session if you had any questions. Yeah. All right. So over at Veeam, they've done some research to see what was the cause of IT outages across some of the organizations to better help organizations across the world maintain their IT environment and avoid any downtime. And as you can see in this slide, the main cause that we've seen over the past has been around like the infrastructure or networking outage, which translates to VPC settings as well, or subnets in the AWS world. And another cause that is on the rise and is a big fear for many organizations is cybersecurity. Just because of how costly it could be to an organization. If you have the cost of a downtime, the cost of ransom that some organizations might have to pay in case they weren't able to recover their data. And those bad people, cyber attackers, are getting better at it at a faster rate than security organizations have been able to implement and come up with security tools to avoid those attacks.
Excuse me, one question. What's an OS software outage?
OS software outage, so that's like if an operating system, for example, on a virtual machine goes down.
So a software bug, say in the Linux kernel,
Yeah,
some component of the installed software on the EC2 instance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, and cost of ransom also has been on the rise as well. It's not only that the cyber attackers are on the rise, but it's even the cost is getting more is rising. It doubled between 2020 and 2021. Extortion for multiple payments is on the rise. Most times you see the cyber attackers, like after organizations had paid the ransom, they do not release all the data. They leave some of that data to ask for some more. The threat of ransomware has evolved and become more dangerous and more expensive. And when we think of cost, we're thinking not only of the ransom, but we're thinking also the cost of downtime, loss of business, network costs, for example, people costs on top of the ransom if paid. To make things worse, the idea that the data is being stolen can be a sensitive data that that could be very sensitive. Some organizations can contain some sensitive information such as PII, social security numbers, for example, credit card numbers. And a focus on disabling or destroying the backup infrastructure have been more widely used to increase the chances of a ransom payment. Of course, even if you pay the ransom, the odds of getting your data back been dropping as well.
And I'll say from not personal experience, but a good friend of mine, his company got hit very badly, and it was almost catastrophic.
Yep. Yeah. I'm sure like lots of you have heard about the Colonial pipeline as well. That was we're talking about millions over here. But it's not always the case. Yeah, and our odds for us like IT staff are very low. The bad actors have an infinite amount of time. They can keep on trying on and on and on until like they decide to move on. They only need to be right once. But our organizations have to be right 100% time. They cannot avoid any. They cannot afford any mistake. And this is why security teams are investing more in incident response tools and services to react faster once a breach has been detected. But the programs all include the restoration of the data from a reliable backup to ensure the attack has been contained. Containing the breach and proving you have not lost data means there's no need to pay a ransom and hope your data is recoverable. So the bottom line is having a verifiable and immutable backup system as the last line of defense against ransomware and modern attacks allows you to be resilient when all other defenses fail. And reasons why ransomware has been effective, if we look at this, it's obviously malware. They're injecting our systems with malware, and malwares are continuously being developed, new ones coming up, and they're being developed at a faster rate than the anti-malware providers can come up with a response to those. Starting from the left, like alert fatigue can also be another cause, which is pretty much just the fact that we all see alerts in our systems, but we don't always take them as seriously as they might be, because sometimes they're not that serious. Sometimes it's just like an update that's being required for example, your Microsoft Edge or your Safari, for example, or a different thing. But often those alerts can pile up and you end up missing the serious one that needs actual attention. Missing patches, poor password policies, or even using same passwords on multiple accounts, like for example on your personal and work accounts can be a cause of that as well. Lack of network segmentation. Some organizations go with like a flat network just for easier manageability and to be able to build things quicker. Not testing backups and to see how long it takes to restore, or verifying the backups are clean and it's actually a backup that's working. Misconfiguration as well, where routers and security devices exist with the default passwords and configuration. That's something that's often missed. And inconsistent policies. The move to the cloud is easy. It can be done without IT involvement, leading to poor security choices. And in some cases, data center policies are applied to cloud operations that simply don't work.
Yeah, and it's funny. I can so resonate with this, especially the untested restore. I was at a company where we had a physical server failure. This is back before the cloud, and we were writing in C++, and they discovered that they had been backing up the C++ files, but not the H++ files. And that was very bad.
Yeah. And I'll touch a little bit more on that in a few slides over here, just like on testing, because it is time consuming sometimes, and it's not always possible to keep on running those tests, but I'll touch on this in a little bit also more. So the 5 best practices that we recommend over at Veeam to secure backup, which is like your last line of defense, all starts with first, like being able to identify those threats when they happen. Really popular. Yeah. Being able to identify those threats when they happen. So working on every alert when we see it can be essential, at least like acknowledging that alert or marking it as resolved, depending on which software we're using to look up those alerts. Next, protecting. Again, backup is the last line of defense for many organizations. And they have to have that to ensure business continuity. So making sure those backups are so safe and healthy is important. Oftentimes, like there are some tools that can run those checks for you, but I've seen some organizations where they have the tool but they do not use it. Next, being able to detect using those monitoring and alert data integration APIs to detect the severity of a threat or an alert. So make sure you use those monitoring tools that's available to you from your backup provider. Being able to respond with automation or orchestration as well, that makes our jobs a lot easier, but it is time consuming to learn them. But if we have them, it will make our jobs a lot easier and more valuable as well. Finally, just having a recovery plan in place ensures we can get back online in a faster time. So work on building those plans before it is too late.
Can you just say what the 32110?
Yeah, that's actually in the next slide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's 32110 is a way that we recommend making sure your backup data is safe, healthy, and available when needed. And it's pretty much just making sure you have 3 copies of your data, with 2 of those copies stored on different media types, and 1 of them stored in an offsite location or in the cloud, or also possibly in a different region if you're running in the cloud as well. So 321 is the industry standard. Veeam recommends going the extra step with the extra 10, which is just like an immutable or an offline copy. Air-gapped as well as another terminology that's being used is, and 0 is making sure that there's no errors running those health checks and testing to recoverability verification as well to make sure you can recover quickly. Third way, again, using S3 object lock, which is pretty much the same thing as immutable storage or offline. But S3 object lock is a service that's offered by AWS. Many of you are probably familiar with it. This is a safe way to make sure that it's written once, your data is written once, read many, nobody can come back, bad actors cannot come back, delete them, change anything of the data, or even encrypt it. Fourth way is if you have some production data in the cloud, or you're running all your production data in the cloud, just make sure you store your backups in a different account with different set of credentials. Don't take this as the only way to protect your data, but just like an extra added layer of security. I'm pretty sure there's as much as we add layers of security, it can't, like, we're not doing enough, because there's going to be different ways that there'll be those bad actors are going to be able to get into that data. But so any ways that is easy, manageable, I highly recommend doing them. And last but not least, like use the least privilege access permission. It's highly recommended by AWS. And that's pretty much just like, okay, you have a user that needs a set of permissions, just start with the least amount of permissions that are needed. Do not go off of like a template that's available or that's being used by another user.
Can I ask you a question on this? Because I've seen, I mean, we all say it is privilege. And then I think most of us have been in some team where, you know, is, oh, well, I was just doing this for dev. And so it starts all over the place. And then it escaped into production. And then people say, well, you know, I've got one, you know, IAM role that, you know, almost everything's using, so I can't lock it down. And, you know, assuming you're faced with one of these, you know, sort of disasters, you know, how would you suggest going about trimming it down? Because I've been in a place where they're like, hey, I'm afraid to trim it down because I'm sure something will break.
Well, maybe start like having like creating another role and testing it with that one. There's like a policy simulator that you can leverage for the other one to make sure that you have the permissions that are needed. But of course, and I'm pretty sure I'm not 100% if it's there, but just like using one role for multiple services, users, or groups is not recommended because, again, as you said, like not everyone needs all the permissions that fall under a role. Maybe also try creating different policies, attach it, and run that policy as well. Test it, see what it can do.
Oh, absolutely. It just, I found that this is one of the areas where it's very hard to get management buy-in. You know, the conversations like, hey, I want to take some time to do the thing that might break some things, but I'll try not to, but it will protect us against things that we hope never happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, this is this is dangerous. Like definitely, I mean, because there's the policy simulator, as I said, like that one can show you what permissions and what you can do in your AWS environment. So the leveraging the policy simulator will definitely kind of put some things in ease and make sure that you have enough permissions to do your job and not being given like extra excuse me, not given extra permissions to do things that probably you're not supposed to do.
Sure.
Let me add one thing to what you were just asking. Managing permissions in AWS is very difficult. It requires a fine-tooth comb, and what happens is there's so many granular permissions. You could spend a full-time, it's a full-time job to just go through and figure what's needed. And from a security standpoint, there was a point where there are a set of roles and preset roles in AWS that we were not allowed to use because that was a security hole. We had to take each permission out and create our own policies, one by one, permission by permission, policy by policy. And it was very time consuming to get it right. So I don't think there's any easy way. It's just, it requires manpower and man hours.
Correct. Yeah.
Hi,
Yeah. There's.
am I audible?
Yes.
Hi. So AWS has the access analyzer, which tells you what permissions that a particular user has accessed over time. So you are able to restrict or turn down the privileges that a user or service account is using. So if the user is, or the service account is using like put bucket, get object ACL, etc., it tells you all of those to the access analyzer, and then you're able to create a policy using those results.
And that's
Right.
true, but it's just over time. And so you have to they have to have been using the service for a period of time to gather that information. And sometimes you have to open up an environment with a level of security just before it's even authorized to operate. And then so no one's on the system at that time to even test it, unless you're running tests. And there's most times that significant type of testing is impossible until you put real users on. So I know what you're referring to, but that's the situation
Right.
in some cases for
Right.
more
And-
secure environments. Let me put it that way.
Right. And I think it is a great notion to say, hey, let's analyze what's been going on in production for a couple of weeks, and then let's say that constitutes our set of policies. A problem with that is it's not just did the users exercise things as well that they should have, but what about a failure case? It's often true that in a failure case, a system will do other things. And so it might be that you have a perfectly tuned least privilege for the happy path, but then the system gets into a bad state and your permissions don't allow them to do the things that they only have to do in a bad state, and it makes it worse. So it's a great idea conceptually, but I have misgivings that, if I only test it in the happy path, my bad path could get worse pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
Just to add on the same subject, that is why I like it when vendors like Veeam on their KBs provide you with the policy to use when you're creating access roles for integration into AWS, if that makes sense.
No,
Yeah.
it does, except certain secure environments, they don't want any outside policies, only created internally, if you run into that situation. But if it's not so secure, it's great. It helps you.
Yeah, I mean, with Veeam, we give you the script, like the JSON script, for example, to create into your environment, if that's the way that you want to go around with it, or even for example, like in a situation where you're installing the Veeam backup for AWS appliance, you can give it the permission as well to create those policies, or go around with copy and pasting from the user guide the policies that are needed to perform either everything that we support, or if you wanted to restrict the usage to specific services, you can also we have them separated by service.
Right. Yeah. That's what I was referring to. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Also, other considerations: multi-factor authentication, or role-based access control as well. That doesn't fall like under the AWS policies, but like with other tools that you're integrating into your AWS environment, make sure if those tools or features are available, also use them as also another layer of security. Now, as you all said, like we all know that, and it's easier said than done to apply into our environment. The least privilege, for example, access, or even like trying to implement or integrate with like a multi-factor authentication provider. It's not as easy, but let's look at it in a different way. Why do you think so? Like, is it because you're using a legacy backup solution that does not support the modern applications very well, or will not help you with your cloud environment? Or maybe you're limited to one platform that restricts and doesn't have all those features we need nowadays to have better control of our data. And using a platform native, for example, it restricts you to one environment possibly, and then you have like your other environments that you have to learn different tools for it. It's just like it gets time consuming, consumes a lot of manpower. As Stephen had said like earlier, it does get overwhelming. and that's the value that Veeam adds in is the ability to own your data despite where it resides and where it's being operated. So for instance, like even if you're trying to protect like Microsoft 365, which is recommended by Microsoft to leverage a third-party tool to protect your data that you have in Microsoft 365. Again, that also like AWS has that model too of that they're responsible to make sure that your infrastructure is available, but we as IT staff are responsible for making sure that that data is protected, safe, available when needed in case of any disaster. We needed to recover like a deleted item, something gets deleted. And with Veeam, our coverage expands to not only AWS, we do work with other cloud providers as well. We work with multiple SaaS applications. Salesforce is on the roadmap. It should be protection for Salesforce should be coming out by the end of this year. Kubernetes on-premises environments, whether it's virtual or physical databases. And we help with the migration as well, like being able to, like giving you the capability to move your data freely wherever you want it to be ran. And even if it's running in AWS, you want it to restore it in other cloud provider or back on premise, we can do that. We do that all on the back end. All you have to do is just select where do you want to restore. So what does protecting data in AWS look like? Many of you are familiar with it, like you have an EC2 instance with an EBS volume attached to it or multiple EBS volumes. You take a snapshot of that. And that's like your restore point, which is EBS snapshots are just like a quick restore point, incremental, tracking only change blocks. Offers fast restore. You can push those snapshots out to an S3 bucket for cheaper storage, but that's going to require also additional intervention from the admin. Also replicating it as a recommended to have them segregated between like from a production account and a backup account. AWS provides that ability to share and copy snapshots across accounts and regions for security. But of course, all that cost adds up. You're talking about 5 cents a gigabyte in most regions, and those end up they do add up as your environment expands. And you start facing the challenges of managing all of those, manually administrating scripts and policies in AWS, which can be error-prone, difficult to audit, the cost that is adding up, security, in-depth configuration that's required to control who has access to the backup data and perform restores. The restore operation requires some cloud knowledge. Validation of retention requirements is also difficult when data protection is not in a policy defined. As well, like snapshots are not portable, so you cannot move them to other platforms. They're locked in. And so the difference between snapshots and backups: snapshots faster to restore, but they cost more. Backups cheaper, but it will take a little bit more time. But using combination of both can offer a comprehensive data protection at an optimal cost. For example, like storing your those snapshots in an S3 bucket for longer retention, if you know that you're gonna keep that for a long time. And this is where Veeam backup for AWS comes in handy. It simplifies all of that for you with a policy-driven AWS native backup. and recovery, leveraging the EBS snapshots for frequent recovery points and fast instance volume and file level recoveries, as well giving you support or security support for cross-account and cross-region backup, recovery, and DR, giving you the cost control to know how much a policy is gonna cost you before running that policy. It's built in as you're going and building that policy, specifying your schedule for your, excuse me, specifying your schedule for those snapshots and backups. Before the summary page kind of like gives you a breakdown of how much that policy is going to cost you. And finally, unifying the management, being able to control multiple environments from a single pane of glass. In short, it gives you the capability to set and forget, pretty much eliminating any manual process or scripts that needs to be created. Fast and flexible, offering you different level of restores at different times. A lower cost backup and leveraging cheaper tiers in S3 as well. Greater security against helping you fight against ransomware attacks and cyber threats. A single platform to manage your environment, whether it's virtual, in the cloud, it's a SaaS environment, or even Kubernetes environments, all can be managed from a single platform and letting you easily migrate and move from one environment to another. Any questions about those?
It's a lot to take in. I mean, I think simply the fact of having the backup be, handled by someone else. So presumably if the bad actor, breaks into my account, that doesn't mean that they, and that means they have access to everything that I had. Presumably this is controlled by Veeam. So, that's still protected even if they got into my system.
Yeah. Next, I had just like walk you through like how Veeam backup for AWS works. Is that something that you guys are interested like in seeing?
Yeah, I think a
Yeah.
demo is always cool.
All right. So Veeam backup for AWS is available to be installed from the marketplace. It comes in with like 3 different editions. Excuse me. So you have the free edition, which allows you to test it, work with 10 instances, see how it works. Replication. You're not limited with its capability with the free edition. You're just limited to either time or the number of instances that you can protect. And then you have the bring your own license, which is licenses that we offer to you. Same license can be applied to your on-premise or cloud instances. And the beauty of that one is it gives you the flexibility of being able to, for example, if you have that license running for an AWS instance, and you decided you wanted to move that instance somewhere else, that license will move with that instance immediately. You don't have to purchase like another license to protect it somewhere else. And then finally, you have the paid edition, which is pretty much just, sorry, it's pay as you go. So as you're protecting instances, you're paying for those instances. Once you install it, 3 components are like fall under the management of the appliance. So you have the server, which you have the server, worker, and repository, and I'll go through what each of those are in next slides. Deployment pretty much looks that way. You access it through the marketplace. It's it gets deployed through the CloudFormation. AMI is stored in there. You don't have to bring anything, and you can select whether you want to deploy it in a different account, or it can also be deployed in a production account. We definitely recommend that it gets deployed in a backup account. So the first component is the server, which is pretty much your GUI. It's an HTML, access through HTML. You manage your policies from there. You can do your restores from there as well. And that's where all the configuration and integration happens. It can communicate with Veeam Backup and Replication, which is our core product. And for a single pane of glass type of management, that all can be done through Veeam Backup and Replication. Next component are the workers, which are pretty much what does the whole heavy lifting. Those workers are create the Veeam Backup data. They're on demand to minimize operational cost, and they're not sitting idle when there's no tasks assigned to them. So once a task is assigned to them, they get booted up and then terminated as soon as the task is complete. Each worker dedicated to backing up an instance, which offloads data processing for scalability. No need for an expensive high resource server. It also optimizes backup efficiency, can run as many backups simultaneously as needed. And the users do not have to size their environment to determine how many workers or proxies they need. And the way that it looks, so yeah, once like your Veeam Backup like sees your environment, you decide to take a backup of those snapshots. That's when the workers get deployed. They read that data from the EBS snapshots, do their magic, and then push them back into like the S3. We generally, like when we take that snapshot, we convert them into an image level backup. We do compression and dedupe on them to give you additional cost savings, and then store them in a Veeam format in the S3 bucket, which can be moved into different buckets, for example, into different regions, different accounts, different cloud providers, or even back on premise.
Honey, that Veeam format, is that documented and open so that, say, if someone for whatever reason, you know, they make a backup and then there's a licensing issue and they no longer have access to the Veeam software, they can still read their own backups, or do they need to have an active Veeam license to be able to read the backups created with this software?
No, actually you do not need. So as if the backup is created and like your license, for example, expired and you decided you do not want to renew that license, your license only is needed to do those backups, but to do restores, you do not need a license. So you can essentially like restore from those backups without a license, without even like an active license.
Okay, but you said it's a Veeam specific format that they're backed up in. So how would one read that? Is it
With
something?
From the Veeam software, you can do those restores.
Okay, so even if there's no license, the Veeam software will still do the restore.
Correct.
Great, thank you.
No problem.
So the license is actually required on both sides, right? When you are actually taking the backup and also when you are restoring it.
Is it?
Is it? Yeah, I'm just asking. Like if I take the backup when I have license in one of the accounts, like, is that possible in the other account? If I go and restore, is that possible?
To my knowledge, you don't need a license to restore, as long as like your only licenses are running to make sure that you have backups running. But to perform a restore, a license is not needed as long as it's been backed up into with a Veeam format, for example, or whatever. Performing restores does not require a license, an active license to be available. But generally, when a license actually also is coming up to expire, we give like a month heads up, for example, and to make sure that you are aware of the license coming up to expire, is about to expire, and as well, like to allow you some time to manage and do any changes that are needed.
Sounds good.
And, sorry, go ahead, Brian.
No.
Yeah, so and is the backups, is the software meant for taking the backups of EC2 EBS snapshots only, or does it work for database backups or any sort of other backups as well?
So with AWS right now, we support EFS, RDS, and as well Aurora, EFS files as well, and with no added cost, VPC configurations. And our VPC, like for VPC, we're we give the like, so we run a backup. You can schedule those backups as well, and you can do comparisons, for example, between like the current state and previous state, and we give you the capability to restore, like if something happened like in your VPC environment, you don't necessarily have to restore the whole VPC. If it's, for example, a subnet or a route table that has changed, for example, or a security group that some changes happen to it, we give you that flexibility to just restore like specific components if needed. And for EBS volumes, for example, we offer, or yeah, sorry, for EC2 instances, we offer the flexibility to, excuse me, recover either the full instance or just like the volume on that instance to a different location, for example, or to the same target. And as well, giving you the capability to do file level recoveries. So if it's just like a single file or folder that you need to recover.
Thank you.
Yeah. So snapshots always reside in the same account and region as the source instance. The appliance can replicate snapshots to other regions. If you had a use case where you might want to restore in another region, and other AWS accounts as well. So it gives you the flexibility of replicating to same AWS account, different region, different AWS account, or different AWS account and different region as well. Finally, all of those are stored like in an S3 repository, which everyone is pretty much familiar with over here, which offers like a lower cost backup. And as well, you can tier down to the cheaper tiers as well. So you don't necessarily only have to use the S3 standard. We do support the archive and deep archive, or Glacier and deep. Yeah. I always mix them up between the AWS and the Azure ones.
Right.
So
Well,
essentially,
and Amazon has been changing the names.
Yeah.
Glacier Instant Access.
Mhm. Yeah. So yeah, pretty much that's how it looks overall. Yeah, and we like analyzed kind of like how much it would cost, like for example, just snapshots, so like on 100 gigabytes, for example, per month. And you're looking like at $5 a month for 100 gigabyte snapshot. But if you were to leverage the Veeam backup, because of the compression and deduplication that we add to it, and then storing it in an S3, given an average cost. Of course, it differs from one region to another, but like here, you're saving almost 77% just leveraging the Veeam backups on that.
And I think AWS also started using AWS Backup itself, right? This service. So compared to that, like what additional things we might get from the software here?
Veeam. Well, you get the compression, the savings on the compression, and the duplication that we do on your data. You get the cross account region capability, as well as the mobility, that's the ability to move your data easily across different cloud providers or even back on premise, and as well, like just like the if you had like on premise, being able to manage everything from a single pane of glass, whether it's your Microsoft 365 AWS environment, VMware AHV environment, all can be managed all from a single pane of glass. And the tool has been like also as well. We are leveraging like all the AWS native capabilities. We're highly depending on what API calls access they give us to be able to perform those jobs as well. Before the latest release, for example, we did not support Aurora. Right now we do. And there's more like on the roadmap coming up for like future releases. We're on an average, we're averaging every like 6 to 8 months with a new release for AWS, Azure, GCP as well. Questions?
Thank you. This is really interesting. And 77, I think, is percent is nothing to sneer at.
Yeah. Yeah, very good questions. Also along the line, does anyone have any other questions that they'd like to ask? Hopefully I wasn't going too fast and I was able to explain things clearly. Everyone was able to hear me clearly.
Yep. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this was great.
Okay, awesome.
You're very welcome.
Awesome. Well, we'll have the recording up shortly. Again, thanks to Hani and thanks to Veeam, and thanks everyone for coming. Next month we'll be looking at microservices, and then it's reInvent time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you everyone for joining this session, asking all those good questions along the line as well. Appreciate it.
Okay, well, yay. Thanks. Everyone, take care, be safe, and we will see you next month.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye.
Bye.